Hi guys, before we get started with today's video, just wanted to say thanks for all the support you've given us so far. The channel's been growing heaps, we've been putting out some really good content, and we love having you guys around. If you haven't already, check out our group video, it's just here, the orange one. Subscribe to the channel, join our group, and you guys can win some fantastic prizes. Now, looking at the analytics, I have noticed that only 25% of our viewers are actually subscribed to the channel. So if you like our stuff, let us know. If there's something we can change, then we'll definitely look to doing that as well. Supercoach, the game that's always changing. My team in December looks vastly different than my team now in January. And you guys will see that in today's episode. The aim of actually upgrading to full premium as quick as you can has kind of come in and has hit really hard. And I'm slowly building the team towards that. It is a work in progress, as everyone's team in January should be, because you just don't have all the answers. If you made your team now and just left it, you wouldn't be winning Supercoach because things happen between now and March. But let me show you guys what the team's like. Starting from the back line, we have Sam Doherty. So, should be playing a bit of midfield this year. Did have some massive scores at the end of 2022. I think he had a 120 and like a 130 playing midfield. Sam Walsh is out. Hewitt's out. There's some real space for him to grow in that position. Right now, he might be a bit of a placeholder for me, but, you know, it is what it is. Jordan Dawson's up next, the man that really burnt me last year. If I didn't have him, let's say, if I did have him, I would have finished about rank 150 instead of the 500 odd that I did. I don't think there's a big position change at Adelaide. If there is, we'll have to rethink everything. But I remember last year, every single week, thinking, hey, I wish I had Jordan Dawson in my team. So that's why he's in there this year. Monster scores, really good accumulator. Next up, we have Big Nick Dacos. Now, we've already covered him in our Backline Premiums that should explode video, and also in our Supercoach locks for this year video. The kid's on fire, dominating preseason. I think if you don't have him, you're in a bit of trouble. Really good player, and at 500k, could end up being 600 while you close your eyes. You know, come week 3, 4, 5, 6, it might be unattainable for a lot of coaches without having to really upgrade to get him in. Here comes the mid-prices. So originally I started with Elliot Yeo, but I've had to change that around to fit in another premium in the midfield. We'll see what happens with Yeo and the guy that we've just brought in, and maybe we'll do some fiddling around and we'll get guys worked out. But for right now, it's Big Jack Bowes. Seems to be playing midfield down at Geelong, training with the midfielders, and had some monster scores in 2021 before he got injured. So hopefully there's a spot for him. If not, there's some pretty good sideways options. You know, downgrade to a Liam Jones or somebody, just depending on what the prices are like. Next up, we have the North Melbourne fave, Josh Goda. He's playing halfback at the moment at North during training and match sims, and really dominated kind of in his first game of football last year. It obviously was last year and this year, but I think there's a real spot for him to play. So we've picked him in our team, at least to start with. We can sideways to a few other players like anyone else, so there's no real risk there at the moment. Next guy up we have is Connor McKenna. Coming back from Ireland, really wants to play finals. Fagan's love child, and has some monster scores under his belt as well. He's only priced at what, like a third, not even a 30, like a 25 to 30. And he will be smashing that every week. I believe he's best 22. They really need some speed and consistency off that halfback down at Brisbane. And a lot of the guys they've got there at the moment are really injury prone. So I reckon he's got a spot. Next up in our backline is a couple of cash cow rookies that should make some money for us. Josh Weddle has been playing really well. Doing quite well from all training reports and things like that. Should make us a lot of cash. Hawthorn's got a lot of space this year for some really good rookies. And I think Weddle's one of those guys to fill the spot. As a bit of a placeholder at the moment, just so I can figure out some cash, we've got Darcy Wilmot in. There's been some talk about him maybe being best 22 this year. I don't know if he will. But coming in at 123k, there's some real flexibility in options. Potentially we could trade up, or we could trade down to a Montgomery or sideways to a Dean, that kind of thing, depending on who's named round one. Obviously, work in progress. In the midfield, as you guys have seen from the thumbnail, first off the ranks is Clayton Oliver. It's hard not to play the guy that's going to have some monster scores every year. And I think if you don't start Oliver, it's really going to hurt. Last year, he only dropped about 60k, and it made it quite hard for the guys who didn't start him. And I reap the benefits every week. He could easily go from a 150 to a 200. And with Grundy throwing the ball down his throat every single game, his scoring is only going to get better. Yes, things are a little bit more claustrophobic. Melbourne may be on a rise. They've swapped some players around. But as a vice captain or captain option every week, alongside the guy I'm going to show you, it's a no-brainer. Next up on our list is the Bont. If you haven't already, I'll link it in the description. Go and watch DR's video about Bont and McRae. Sorry, not Bont and McRae. Bont and Oliver being a good captain or vice captain option every week. Pick one of them as vice captain, the other one as captain, and you're basically winning Supercoach for the first 10 weeks. Yes, there may be some guys who could present some better value that we'll talk about next. But at the moment, they're my two main guys. The aim of the midfield is to generate enough cash to bring in these players, kind of around 6 to 9 or 6 to 10 in Supercoach. This is when your really expensive 600k players, like your Laird, your Lachie Neale, your Tuke Miller, Mills, McRae, and Petrarca, these guys are going to drop in value. They'll be available at that 500, maybe 500 to 550k mark. One stinker score in the first run of games, because they're so highly priced, will really drop down their value and drop down their price. That's when you pick them up, and building your team around grabbing those guys who will be top 8 to top 10 players at a much lower value is how you do really well. Next up off our ranks is a guy who has come from a depleted midfield and I think has some real value for us. And that is Tom Green. Had some monster scores at the start of last year and has really kind of built up his fitness again this year. Hopper's left, Taranto's left. They may be in my side, but we'll just wait and see. They've left GWS, and there's a hole there for Green to come in and really, really dominate and take majority of the mid-minutes there at GWS. The benefit of Tom Green is the fact that he can't really play anywhere else. Normally, that'd be a detriment for Supercoach and for the AFL in general. But for us, that means that every centre bounce should be there. Basically, every contested possession should be close to his. There's no one there going to be pushing him out for a spot. And he's shown that he's got some monster stealing as well. Next up on our list is Tom Mitchell. If you haven't already, check out Abdul's review on Tom Mitchell. I'll put it down in the description. It's really worth bringing him in this year. He's training the house down. Kind of a team change, going from a Hawthorn who weren't really competing for finals. Sam Mitchell was kind of clearing house, and a lot of guys were getting pushed out. And that's kind of what happened with Tom Mitchell. You know, he was in the team, but Newcomb came in and was taking a lot of the spot. A few other guys were taking a lot of spot. Tom Mitchell kind of got relegated to the forward line a little bit, or at least half forward. Very, very limited mid-minutes. That won't be happening at Collingwood. We've spoken about him before in our locks video, in our mid-prices who could explode video as well. But he's the guy that is going to get majority of the tap-outs from Darcy Cameron or whoever's rucking, hand it off, get some really good points there. And that's why we've picked him. Next up on our list is Jacob Hopper. He's only priced at like a 65 and has had scores of 90 plus for a lot of years in a row. He is coming off injury, but from all reports, Richmond have brought him in to play majority midfield there, and that's what he's going to be doing for our team. This guy could become a keeper. I don't think he will, but with scores of 90 to 95, he's going to be a premium price player in the first 5 or 6 weeks. If you don't have him in, you're doing something wrong this year. A little bit of a speculative pick for me today is Mr. Dom Sheed. Has been a premium in the past, has done really well at West Coast, and they're kind of rebuilding the midfield. They need these older established players to come in with some scores of 100 plus in the past. The guy's similarly priced to Hopper. He's going to score more than 20 on his average. If he becomes a premium by himself, fantastic. But with a rookie and him, you might be getting led in the first, round 6 to 8. And that's kind of fantastic for us, As I said at the start, it's actually upgrading these players to a position of keeping that we really want to do. Stepping stones are fantastic in Supercoach. It's even better when they can pop out 80s and 90s pretty easy. There's not going to be a lot of players at West Coast taking points off him in the midfield, and that's why we've picked him there. Next up on our list is the guy who should have probably been the number 1 pick this year. From all reports, he's training the house down at Brisbane. I was a bit worried. I thought, hey, he might be not best 22. They just included Dunkley. No one's really left from that team, but from all reports, he's going to be playing a majority of time. He does have a lot of high ownership. What is he coming at? 66%. So right now, filming in end of January, he might be the most owned player in the midfield. And that's something where originally I was against picking him, but that was something that really swayed me as well. You kind of have to have these players in your team, because if you don't and they go big, it really hurts. And if they fail, you're failing with majority of the competition as well. So there's no real loss there. Next up on our list is Big Will Phillips. Training the house down at North Melbourne, doing really well there. And he's coming off injury, guys. His price is not inflated. He's going to give you 60, 70, 80, potentially even 90s every week. He's going to make you a lot of money and kind of be that rookie outside of Ashcroft that you want to put on field every year. Last year, I got burnt by having Rochelle in the midfield. Got burnt by having Ward or Connor McDonald on field. These guys who were scoring 20s and 30s. Will Phillips will not do that. He's made the midfield his own. He's dominating against men. Sure, it's North Melbourne, but that's okay. Now, finishing off the bench, I've got a couple of rookies who I'm really looking at the moment, but it's kind of just wait and see time for them. So first off, we have Oscar Baker. Should be playing majority wing at the Dogs. Seems like he's doing that in the preseason training, and that's why we brought him in. Matthew Johnson's up next. Similar role. Midfielders who are available in the midfield as rookies do really well, and that's kind of why we've got him. There's a bit of spot there with Blake Acres and a couple of other guys who are injured. Well, not injured, who got traded off. And Freo's kind of bringing in that next crop of youth. These kids, if they're ready to go, I don't really see Longmuir not playing them. Now, as a bit of a cheaper option, I've got Blake Drury at the moment. The DPP is nice, and from what I've seen at training, the kid should be playing pretty early. Maybe things change and we have to trade him out and swap him out for someone, in March. But from all reports at the moment, playing kind of half-back, Caleb Daniel type role in the back pocket as well. Really, really good player there. Has moved up the ground. If he's not kicking goals, he's setting them up and really pushing from the back line forward. Has great footy IQ, and that's kind of why we brought him in. Looking at the rucks. Now, the ruck line has been the hardest line for us to actually pick in Supercoach this year. There's been talk about Max Gawn. There's been talk about Brodie Grundy coming in. There's been talking about Darcy Cameron, who's now being told, hey, everyone's going to pick, well, Collingwood's going to be playing Mason Cox on top of him. So there goes that pick for us. One of the guys who's been trading the house down, who we brought into our side, is Tim English. Rory Lobb's come in and really stopped English, similar to a Bont, stopped English from having to play forward. Yes, he'll rotate forward a little bit and get some goals, but he's not relegated to the forward line anymore. There's not a Jordan Sweet who can only play ruck that forces English to the back line, or not to the back line, to the forward line. And that's kind of why we put him in there. He will be the number 1 ruck at the Dogs, and with some other taller players around him, stops the need for having another ruckman in the team. There were some monster scores this year, 2022, of like 150s. So if you don't have him and he goes big, you're going to be scrambling to bring him in. Next up on our list is Rowan Marshall. There has been some talk about the forward line at St Kilda kind of being a bit of an issue, but from all reports, he is going to be the number 1 ruck. They are trying to find someone in there to fill the spot that Max King's not going to be playing in. Allison was going to be that player, but is now, I think he's broken his foot or done his ACL or something like that. He's going to be out for a long time. They'll figure it out, but Rowan Marshall is training to be the number 1 ruck. I think under Ross, he should be okay. Nick Madden comes in as everyone's favourite R3 loophole player. I believe GWS probably has, I think from memory, has a lot of Sunday games or late Saturday games. As again, watch that DR video I'll post in the comments. It's worth bringing him in as the ruck. I've seen Bennett from West Coast in there. I've seen a couple of others. But this year, I think there's enough value on field that missing out on a captain score is a bad thing. The ruck forward DPP is fantastic. So you can swap him out with a player later on if someone becomes available. But at the moment, definitely chuck him in there. Talking about the forward line. So I think straight up, everyone should be having Josh Dunkley in. Outside of Ashcroft, I think he's the second highest owned player at the moment. So if you don't have him and he goes big, you're going to struggle. If you do have him and he goes big, you're happy. So there's no real benefit of not playing him this year. Yes, he is a little bit pricier, but I think there's worse options this year and other places you can actually make value that not playing him is a problem. Next up on our list is Connor Rozee. Did really well last year. We've spoken about him in our breakout plays in the forward line. Have a look at that video if you haven't already. But there's even more articles coming out now that's saying, hey, this guy had a breakout year in 2022. He wants to go to another level. Port have kind of said, him and Butters, the midfield is yours. Take it with all hands. Dominate, do really well. And that's kind of what we're seeing in the preseason so far. Up next as my third premium in the forward line is Tim Taranto. Dominating training at Richmond. Has been brought in to play majority in midfield there. Maybe with a tiny bit resting forward, but probably not. At 500K, if he starts coming out with some 100-plus scores, you're going to be scrambling to bring him in. I think it's a mistake not to play him this year. He has shown that he can score well in the past, and Richmond have brought him in, spent a lot of trade value for him not to play forward. Dominating preseason, dominating time trials, dominating everything at Richmond. And this is a premiership team with a lot of premiership players still in there. If he was no good, you would be able to see it. Pretty crazy not to have him. As our last three on-field options, we've gone a bit cheap. Guys who should be making money for us on the field. First up, we have big Oscar Allen. Coming in to play key forward, that was Kennedy's spot at West Coast. May do a little bit of pinch hitting in the ruck, but we'll just wait and see. He's priced at something like a 30. If he doesn't make 50 plus every week, you can come back, halfway through the season and yell at me for making you pick him. But I think it's pretty safe at the moment. Next up, we have Toby McLean. Priced similarly to an Allen. I think he's priced at a 30 this year. Was a premium a few years ago. Has come back from injury. Has been doing really well. Been playing majority mid-minutes in the preseason intra-club matches. Yes, they're intra-club matches, but if he's playing in the mids, that's where they want him. People are saying, Big J, he's playing in the B team and not the A team. If intra-club matches were supposed to be a slaughter, they would put all the good players on one team and all the bad players on another team. Sometimes they like to mix the players around because that's how they get the scores and that's how they really get tested on field. Last up on our list is Big Ben King. Has come back from injury and will be that number one key forward down at Gold Coast. Yes, he is playing some monster players to start with, but that's okay. He doesn't need to come out and pop us a 130, but being a forward who has done fairly well in the past, he could be the Charlie Curnow of this year. He doesn't have to get to 500K, but he should be able to make you a pretty quick 150. One big score in the first 3 or 4 rounds. Him kicking 3 or 4 goals, which I think he's going to do, is going to accelerate his cash gen to the point where you could offload him and a rookie and bring in a premium in almost any position. And that's why we've got him in. The sub rule, as you've seen from the latest video, is something that's really going to hurt this year in Supercoach. You want these mature age players who've played a lot of position, who've played a lot of ball, who've got the bodies that they can run out games. Ben King is not going to get subbed out if he's doing well this year, and that's why you've got to pick him. Finishing off our forward line, we've got Fergus Green, basically just placeholders at the moment. Has been brought in from Box Hill VFL, I believe. Kicked 50-odd goals for them. They've just lost, who did they lose? They just lost Lewis. They've lost Gunston. I think there's a spot for him in that forward line. You generally don't bring in mature age players who score well in the VFL system to relegate them back to the VFL system. as I said with Ben King, he's a guy who can play out the full game. And that's something that Hawthorn are desperate for versus a lot of these kids they brought in. Endurance and capacity to play a full game is huge, saves you from getting the sub rule, and keeps you competitive, which I think they're wanting to do this year. Our last player is Van Ruin. Similar to a Green, but obviously for Melbourne. Ben Brown's still recovering from injury. There's a spot for him in that forward line. The forward line at Melbourne has been really struggling, and I think there's a space for him there. There's been some articles coming out talking about him, just kind of being the player that they want to bring in and want to play. So that's the team, guys. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you really like it, subscribe to the channel. We're building, we're getting there. We will be putting out some player reviews and some player content in the next couple of days as well. Really building up that library that you guys can actually look at over the next few weeks. Coming into, when you're really finishing your teams in March. Once the preseason games start happening and the intra-club games between the clubs that aren't really official, once they start happening, reports coming out, we'll put out some information for that as well. Remember, guys, I'm Big J. Have a nice day. Bye.